Welcome to the Interaction Design Foundation interview series. We're very, very happy today to introduce Aaron Marcus. Aaron has been in the field of design since there was no field of design. He's been doing information visualization and user experience design and user-centered design since before those terms were even widely used. So that was back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, in the zeros. He's still a very, very active designer and an enormously experienced designer. So he's done small contracts, small design jobs, big design jobs, corporate ones, government ones, private ones. He's just about done everything that can be done. So it's a pleasure to have Aaron with us today. And so thanks very much, Aaron, for taking the time to speak with us. It's a true pleasure.
Thanks very much for inviting me to discuss with you my past, present, and future activities in user experience design and information visualization and knowledge visualization. I'm happy to talk with you.
Our first question for you today is, how did you actually get into design in the first place? Could you please tell us a bit about that journey?
Yes. First of all, let me put on my lecture hat, or my interview hat.
Your thinking cap.
Which I've worn for 15 years around the world. So some people only recognize me with this weird hat on. And I can comment on where I got that too. First of all, I started my education in in physics at Princeton University in 1961 through 65. And I achieved escape velocity and wound up in an art and design school at Yale for graduate study of visual communication, graphic design, visual design, and so on. It was there that I actually learned programming of computers, and I became the first graphic designer in the world to use computers in 1967, working at AT&T Bell Labs. A few years later, at Bell Labs, I programmed a prototype interactive page design system for the picture phone, which is essentially a desktop publishing system for use by professional designers. That was about 5 to 10 years ahead of commercial projects. And even in that situation, I was designing user interfaces. Actually, since I've put together a lecture about looking at user experience design in science fiction movies and television, or over the past 100 years, I've discovered and remembered that I've been designing user interfaces since 1953 when I was 10 years old. I have actually drawings of some of my contraptions that I built in the basement of my home when I pretended with my late brother to fly to other planets as imaginary astronauts. So I've had quite a long journey in user interface design, but I taught in universities, became a staff scientist at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory in California in 79, 80, 81, and then decided I would try to take my skills in visual communication and bring them to the computer world, since I was only 1 hour away from Silicon Valley. And I started my firm in 1982, becoming one of the first computer-based design firms in the world.
Right.
I had also, back in 71 to 73, become one of the first, if not the very first, professional designer of virtual reality spaces. I did that as an artist, really creating 3D virtual environments. Over the years, our practice has varied at Aaron Marcus and Associates, or AM&A, and we include now all aspects of user-centered user experience development, which means research, planning, research, analysis, design, implementation, evaluation, documentation, training, etc. So not every project covers all of those tasks, but many of them do. Oh, and by the way, along the way, I've published about 15 books, including multi-volume proceedings of my conference, Design, User Experience, and Usability. and about 300 or 350 articles.
And how would you describe your current role? Are you spreading yourself over a number of things, or?
I am still president of AMA. Most of my activity is involved in giving workshops and training around the world. And I'm currently working on a book called Mobile Persuasion Design, which I may comment on a little bit later.
You've worked on a wide variety of projects. Which one would you call the most memorable one so far, and why is that?
Well, I've been thinking about that question. Um, you know, there are several that are memorable in different ways. Commodore Amiga, some older members of the user experience community may remember this wonderful gaming machine in the 1980s. And they asked us to design a completely revolutionary user interface for their machine, which was one of the first, would have been one of the first three-dimensional depictions of user interfaces. They didn't exist at the time. And we did the whole set of drawings, pixel drawings, etc. for it. But at the last minute, the engineers ran out of time and they did not implement it. They simply used some older version. So that moment in history escaped us.
Mm-hmm.
Another memorable project was the one that we got started with, which was to visualize a research project funded by DARPA, the U.S. Defense Department's Advanced Research Project Agency, which was to visualize the C programming language more effectively. And DARPA at that time had a lot of projects, maybe 20 or 24 projects in so-called program visualization. They canceled all of them except ours, the one that Ron Becker at the University of Toronto and I were leading, because we actually produced something. We wrote a book about the project. We developed a prototype C visualizer, which was orders of magnitude better than anything available, that helped improve program depiction so that novice programmers were able to to comprehend the software better by about 12%, which was quite an incredible achievement. Another we worked on that research for about 3 years. Another memorable project is working on Sabre to reinvent travel booking system for 1/3 of the world's travel agencies. And that involved creating absolutely new metaphors for a visual, graphical approach to travel booking, unlike anything that travel agents had ever seen. And we really appreciated the opportunity to work with marketing people, not with engineers. In fact, the marketing people told us not to talk with the engineers for about 2 years so that we could invent a new solution, which we did. Another memorable project was working with the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank of the United States to develop 3 years in advance a prototype version of software, the graphical user interface, which would enable the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank to monitor all 8,000 or so banks of the United States. And we did that. They eventually built it. Another memorable project was working for Samsung in 2000 to deliver 100 concepts for new mobile smartphones to be delivered into the United States, North America actually, by about 2003. And we had concepts depicted there that were essentially like the iPhone, only that was 7 years later.
Right.
And we were able to deliver all of these ideas to Samsung user interface designers, software engineers, and marketing people, and then they did whatever they wanted to with all of that information. In those 3 years, Samsung went from virtually unknown as a mobile phone manufacturer to number 2 behind Motorola and number 2 behind Sony. So they did an incredible job of product design and development and commitment to good design, I must say. And that was extremely rewarding. So those are a couple of major projects that I can think of, in addition to 5 or 7 years of working with Visa on more than 30 different projects. And that was also our largest contract ever. unfortunately, until the recession in the United States hit in about 2003, 2002.
Right.
So that's a string of memorable projects because of their complexity, their richness of functionality and user communities, and the length of time that our clients would keep us involved in helping to improve numerous aspects of the products and services.
And were they mainly user-centered design projects, or did you take a different approach to each project?
Well, we had worked out a pretty articulated process of user interface design or user experience design that certainly was user-centered. In fact, even in 1982, we may not have had all the terminology of what we would now call personas and use scenarios, etc.
Right.
But we were conducting ethnographic study of programmers in 1982 to 1985, and we were building rapid prototypes, going through iterations of design, reviewing them with our stakeholders, etc. But I must say that from client to client, it often depends on the particular client as to how much aware they are of the user-centered design process. I think one of the biggest problems we ever faced was, actually we didn't face it, but our client was facing, was when we were called in by lawyers for the San Jose Police Department in California. Now, it's very unusual, let me assure you, to be called in for a client who is heavily armed and to be called in by their lawyers. And it was kind of scary, interesting and challenging. And it turned out that the police force of San Jose, which was quite an advanced user of electronics and telecommunication and had commissioned the custom development of software that would help all the police force communicate with amongst all the cars. 20, I think 20 years earlier, 10 or 20 years earlier, but they knew they had to change. Unfortunately, the management did not know about user-centered design process. They didn't know that they didn't know about UX design. And so they didn't know that they should call in someone like us or our many competitors. They had no representatives of their user community on the decision making committees that selected the software. They picked bad software. They rolled out a system that crashed on rollout, and even when they got it running, was not accepted by the police officers who thought the software endangered their lives. Can you imagine? And the police force was getting ready through the union attorneys to sue their own management, to sue the city of San Jose, and to sue the maker of the software. Can you imagine such a situation? Well, we were called in to test the users, the police force, to see if they really were as dumb, excuse me for saying so, but really as dumb and lazy as some people were trying to suggest. It was not the case. The software was poor. And eventually, the software manufacturer, to avoid lawsuits, made changes. They settled everything out of court. But by the time they were finished, they had spent more money and had not saved at all on using off-the-shelf software instead of a custom solution. And if they had only done better user-centered design from the beginning, these small steps that are part of our world would have saved them so many headaches, the threat of lawsuits, and user dissatisfaction.
Okay.
That was a memorable project and quite different from most of ours, luckily, but it was interesting and valuable as a lesson learned about the problems of still managers and management not understanding the value of UX.
Right.
UX, user experience development. And I see this now being in China a lot still, with a lot of companies that do not understand that value and are not yet ready to make a commitment of time and money and setting up centers of excellence for this kind of activity. So it's sort of what we saw in the 1980s in the United States, repeated again now in China.
It's a question you often see on a lot of interview schedules, but how would you define user-centered design?
Well, user-centered design, first of all, means that you have to understand all the stakeholders of creating software products and services, and to be involved in a process that goes through these steps that I just mentioned of good planning, research, competitive product analysis, research into user needs, doing ethnographic or a contextual analysis to really find out what the stakeholders want, not only the software users, but what the business requirements are and technology requirements as well. Doing iterative steps of analysis and design and of implementation, which, by the way, is, of course, as many people know, is more and more a lean or agile development process, and so has to be conducted under shrinking time frames down to 2-week periods of development.
Right.
So all of the UX development community has to develop quick and dirty, fast and easy methods of accomplishing many of the steps that might have taken much more time in the past, and going on to find ways to evaluate, to test, to do heuristic evaluations, back early to do focus groups or other evaluation techniques that can get at the key problems of the software, and to be able to help convince the software engineers involved to take the right steps to conclude and to change things. In fact, with one of our projects for eBay's Network Operations Center, that required a lot of study and working with the software engineers to finally figure out how we could show them one sheet of paper that would have on there the key problems that we had encountered, sources of information to help convey how to improve things. And once the software engineers saw this as a kind of bug report, they were happy. One page, a bunch of bugs, good, I'll smash those bugs and the user interface will magically be better. And guess what? It was. But it took us a long time to figure out what key information we needed to show our developer community in order to accomplish this kind of end user centered development process.
Right, that makes sense.
So those are many of the steps, including good documentation and training, that are part of a user-centered design process. Iterative, focused on end user needs, preferences, and expectations. And I should point out that it's increasingly important to think about the cultural makeup, not only the age, wealth, education, demographics, but the general culture of the people involved. Products and services that are developed for the US may not work out perfectly in China, and vice versa. There need to be certain changes made, not only in metaphors, but also mental models, navigation, interaction, and of course appearance, including the language of the product and service. But we have done recently for one of our clients a culture audit of software before translation, to point out things that should not be translated in the first place because they're inappropriate for the target culture. In this case, we were working with a developer of educational software that was originally built in English, but now being delivered into Saudi Arabia.
Would you say that there has been a movement from heavyweight methods, to more lightweight methods in user-centered design?
Yes, definitely. For example, excuse me, we often point out that um, quick heuristic evaluations can get to key areas of success and failure from expert point of view, from an expert's point of view, using heuristics or guidelines that have been developed over decades, so that you know where to do targeted user studies, because there's no time and money to do everything. So to focus one's expensive user tests on certain key areas, you need to know which are the likely best payoff or return on investment for making that extra effort. And all of the steps need to be streamlined so that they can be delivered to software development teams who are on tighter and tighter schedules of product and service development.
So what would you say are the main constraints for user-centered design?
These days, it's our experience that even if people know about user-centered design,
Mm-hmm.
management seems to have, especially in large corporations, large groups, difficulty coming to any decisions in reasonable time.
Right.
After two recessions in the U.S. and to some extent worldwide, people want, the clients and prospective clients want more and more for less and less. And although they do understand the value increasingly of user experience design or development, they're still under tight budget constraints. There are exceptions, of course. Someone may be very well funded. You may have a particularly enlightened leader, but it's still a challenge to get people to make the decision in reasonable time and to move forward. In one case, with one of our prospective clients, it may sound ridiculous, but I've been talking with them for 7 years about a wonderful project. It's a really great project to help improve the usability of an entire subway system of a major city by thinking about better user experience design. And it could have incredible benefit, but the management has been very slow to understand the problem, very slow to make decisions about money. The money involved is trivial, but the organization is slow, is so complicated politically and socially that it's been very, very tough. I've already proposed 2 or 3 times variations of proposals. Many other people would give up and move on, but the value of such a project is so
Okay.
enticing, so enormous, that I continue to at least talk with them about this as a project in the future. Unfortunately, many of these big system projects take a long time to decide on. It's different in startup companies where people may want results right away and can act right away, but there are sometimes other problems of simply limited resources to do the necessary effort. I'll have a comment about that in relation to our machine projects later.
Do you feel that people have been slow to adopt user-centered design?
Well, it's definitely the case that more and more people understand the terminology, the concepts, the value of usability, of user-centered design, of experience design across all platforms, mobile, desktop, etc. But there are still pockets of people who seem trapped into a world from 20 years ago. I was just listening at a conference here in Japan, where I am now, of people in the medical industry, and the problems that were being discussed that had been found in medical systems of errors were so enormous and so outrageous that you thought, how could this possibly be in the year 2014, about to go into 2015? that people could still be producing software this way, so full of bugs? And the answer is, in part, because nurses are blamed for the problems, not the manufacturer of the software. And there are social and political uh, activities or forces at work that allow the manufacturers to still produce terrible user interfaces and terrible user experiences. And you would think that this just couldn't exist among well-known developers of medical equipment worldwide, but in fact, it still, in certain areas, still exists. But with the existence of organizations like the User Experience Professionals Association, with Computer Human Interaction Community, with the conference that I run called Design, User Experience, and Usability, that's part of HCI International each year, thousands and thousands of people are becoming involved, are supported by large corporations and startups, and they're helping to change the culture of the company in which they're embedded. So it's definitely not the 1980s and 90s, which I had to battle just to explain, what do you mean by user interface design? What is a user interface? What do you mean by users? And uh, we're beyond that for sure. And there are many kinds of professionals, interaction designers, ethnographers, anthropologists, cognitive scientists, user interface designers, human factors and ergonomic specialists, all of whom are working with their own terminology and concepts and professional groups to move towards more humane, better software-based or computer-based products and services.
Right.
So we are making some progress, but we're still not in a well-designed world in general.
In terms of designing user interfaces, what would you say are the 5 most important considerations?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but one way to answer it is something that we have promoted for many years, that in developing computer-based products and services, we've talked about these verbs or these actions, to plan, to analyze, to research, to analyze, to design, to implement, to document, to evaluate. Now, if you ask, what is it that we're documenting? What are we designing? What are we researching? We have said that there are 5 essential components of user interfaces or user experiences that have to be resolved. They are metaphors, mental models, navigation, interaction, and appearance. Some people call this just interaction design, but we combine interaction and communication together in what I think is a more comprehensive set of terms, concepts, or theory. And all of those 5 things are there all the time at a small scale and a large scale within product and service. We also have a theory about advanced applications that have come up through our activities over the past 5 years, especially in mobile user experience design, but I think that they apply across the board in all computer platforms. And that means the 5 things that we've included in a comprehensive theory or approach to user experience design, especially for mobile, but for all platforms, is creating good dashboards, which is a kind of information visualization challenge. Having a journey map, presenting the journey map to the user. The dashboard tells you where you are in space and time and other objectives. The journey map tells you where did you come from and where are you going, and helps you to understand the process, the roadmap, the overview. Focused social networks, not all 5,000 of your Facebook friends, but who are the 5 to 7 people who care about your journey? Just-in-time tips and advice, or focused knowledge. Not all 10 million things you could find out about something on an internet search. But what is it that I, as a person on a journey, need right now in these circumstances? And how can that be presented in a useful way so that I can make smarter decisions faster? That's really the mission and the slogan of our company, helping people to make smarter decisions faster. And finally, sorry?
And as part of that, does that mean that we're moving closer to customization and flexibility of user interfaces?
Yes, I believe so. It's going to be required, and our software is getting smarter and more complex to facilitate that. And it brings up some other issues like the quantified self, how much data I want to reveal about myself so that some software agent can create a custom solution, and whether or not I will eventually spin a cocoon around myself that will isolate me from the real world, and I may be happy but completely disconnected from reality. I could just as well be in an insane asylum. Anyway, the final one of the 5 key elements of advanced software is incentivization. That means games and gamification are necessary to think about. Rewards, awards, badges, leaderboards, nostalgia shops, workshops, virtually anything that can keep people engaged, interested, give them an enjoyable part of that user experience, because the challenge is not just to create things that are usable and even useful, but are also enjoyable, are engaging, are delightful. Now, you may wonder how running a piece of medical equipment could take advantage of gamification or other incentives. But the fact is, even in very serious performance of work in productivity-oriented situations or contexts, there are a lot of boring moments. It's sometimes necessary to keep people focused and attentive and productive. And gamification techniques, even in enterprise software, can find ways to make that a more enjoyable and productive experience that people learn from, have fun with, and get their work accomplished in good ways. And sharing some of that experience with others is a good way for both providing a little competition to perform better and to have the joy of storytelling about what I did or how I did it, and to contribute to improved activities within an organization or corporation, which helps me as a member or as a stakeholder feel a valued and valuable part of the community. All of that can happen with our approach to a complete process of advanced user experience development.
Now, you've touched a bit on the topic of mobile user experience design. Could you please tell us a bit more about that?
Well, we've been involved with mobile user interface and user experience design since about 1989, actually, when Motorola contacted us about designing the look and feel for an advanced GPS navigation system, which was about at least 5 years ahead of most US products. They were more advanced in Japan and in Europe at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, we were contacted by Samsung. We gave user experience workshops and tutorials to their entire company in the year 2000, including mobile development team. And then we eventually, that was 1997. And we eventually worked on mobile development, creating advanced concepts for Samsung in the year 2000. And we've worked with Microsoft on its smartwatch project. We've worked with Motorola. We worked with Nokia, even to design PowerPoint training for all of Nokia's third-party software developers to explain the Nokia way. And I've written a book called Mobile Video, or co-written rather, from Springer, that talks about the use of mobile in the phone world. So now, mobile products and services constitute a major way in which we communicate. There are 6 or 7 billion of these phone devices around the world. China and India lead the way with about a little more than almost 1 billion phones apiece. US and Brazil are the third and the fourth largest. And it's clear that this device needs to be accounted for. I can tell you, however, that in I think it was I'm forgetting now, 1993, maybe it was later, I created the first special interest group on mobile user interfaces. At that time, they were viewed as so puny in the SIGCHI community that people even laughed at the idea of bothering to spend time. Most of the interest went into desktop software. But I could certainly see the future then, and I thought it was important to involve user interface design professionals or user experience professionals in the issues of developing good mobile products and services. And I've been giving tutorials and writing books and articles about that ever since. And certainly there are major resources of this information available now, books, workshops, competitor organizations and companies, and that's good. For the past 5 years, we've been involved with the development of 10 case studies of trying to combine in mobile phones or tablets information design plus persuasion design to change people's behavior. I learned from a project many years ago, 30 years ago, that it was not sufficient just to give information. You had to help lead people to behavior change in relation to energy conservation, for example. So we chose our Green Machine project as the first one of 10 projects for which we would work for 3 months on R&D of a concept design, in this case to help home consumers save energy. What I was saying was that our first Green Machine project in 2009 explored how to help home consumers save energy. And we had seen that research had shown users can achieve a 10% saving just by having better feedback. So we created this concept design that showed how this could be accomplished, making sure that in our project, the design involved, as I said earlier, dashboards, journey maps, focused social networks, just-in-time knowledge, and incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And SAP enterprise software manufacturers saw the project, liked it, and brought us in to help create actual mobile prototypes for enterprise use. And we consulted with them about a particular project that combined persuasion design with sustainability. And that was pretty exciting. That was a good way for our concept design to move onward towards commercialization. Since that time, we've developed 9 other machine projects, as we called them. The second was the health machine, to help convert people into better nutrition and exercise to avoid obesity and type 2 diabetes. We've seen in the last few years that a lot of health applications and devices like Fitbit and Apple's health application have moved in this direction. We did this 4 years ago and published information about how this could be done. We also did the money machine, which was intended to help baby boomers change their behavior about spending and saving so that they would have enough money at the end of their longer lives with better health. The story machine was trying to change people's storytelling behavior among children, grandchildren, and grandparents. All of our mobile devices help us live busier lives and communicate more, but that doesn't necessarily lead to storytelling and preserving family legacy, family heritage. So we were trying to find a way that the mobile device could help with that. The innovation machine, we studied innovation theory. We put together use personas and use scenarios, did competitive analysis, created concept designs, and selected screen designs that showed how a mobile device could help people within an organization or a company contribute to innovating new ideas, helping to gather other people who would contribute and provide experience, wisdom, techniques that could be valuable, and they could move up the chain and become more viral, let's say, within the company and achieve something better that all of the people within the company could benefit from, and hopefully even people beyond the company as in terms of their customers or the world at large. The same kind of approach could be adapted to other uses like community innovation for social and political good. The travel machine was aimed at trying to convert leisure and business travelers into culture travelers to better connect with the culture they're in or visiting and to connect with people. The driving machine was a tablet-based prototype concept design that would enable drivers to be more sustainable drivers and to drive more safely. The learning machine was a tablet concept design that assumed that all brick and mortar schools might disappear or be less important when everyone worldwide had access to all human knowledge from information and training and education sources and could sign up and be better learners, better students. Sort of taking the ideas that are frequent now among MOOCs, MOOCs, massive online communities, and take that and work that out in terms of our 5 key components: the dashboard, journey map, social networks, just-in-time knowledge, and incentives, to see how that would play out. And finally, we have worked on the happiness machine, which studied happiness theory. and tried to figure out how people could become happier using mobile devices to change their behavior. And I don't mean just the happiness we get from drinking another cup of Coca-Cola or bottle of Coca-Cola and getting the sugar rush, um, but something that's much deeper and longer lasting, that comes from doing good deeds, staying connected to people, thinking positively, journaling, and keeping track of the happy things that occur in one's life. You will find these techniques in most religions of the world and most of the gurus of happiness that are active around the world. And we took these 5 basic tasks and we tried to see how they would be realized or visualized or experienced in terms of our machine concept. And finally, we've just finished the marriage machine, which is intended to show how couples can bond together better and live better lives, happier lives, communicate better, etc., using again some fundamental techniques of marriage counseling, marriage theory, etc. Whatever, whoever is involved in the couple or partnership. So these are 10 examples. We've published them as case studies. We give away the intellectual property. We don't protect it. And as I mentioned, I'm writing a book about this with much more information in it than I've been able to publish so far. And why am I doing this? Because I believe in the value of these topics. I believe in the importance of thinking about all 5 of these components of advanced user experiences, that is to say, the dashboards, the journey maps, and so on. And we are giving away about 3 months of R&D, which often is not possible to do in a lot of startups or even corporations engaging in these processes, because they're often limited by money and time to be able to spend enough time doing the preliminary R&D. So that's what we've made available as a goodwill gesture to the UX development community.
And whereabouts can people get access to these?
Where can they get access to things? We don't have working prototypes. These are concept designs. We have published them in proceedings of conferences at CHI, at my own conference, Design User Experience and Usability, in User Experience Magazine, and in Information Design Journal, among other places. And as I've said, more complete chapters on each case study, all 10 of them, I hope, will be available as a book published by Springer sometime early in 2015. And if people are interested, they can email me at aaron.marcus@amanda.com, and to the extent that I have time, I'll send out a little kit of information or some selected case studies of some of the publications that have appeared.
Right, and so here's a very broad question. If you could give one piece of advice, one tip to would-be designers, what would that be?
Well, there are so many one tips that I might give. Certainly to be persevering. To another tip is learn from other people, from other professions, from other disciplines. Another tip is to be serious and committed about learning. Another tip is to think about the future in terms of wearables and the Internet of Things, because in the future, I think we're going to see a tsunami, just a huge wave of messages coming from our refrigerators and our clothing and our chairs and our toothbrushes even. And there's really future need for professional designers to help work out some sort of knowledge management or some sort of super Siri or better agent to manage all of the information that's floating around in the internet and will now float around even further, which, if we don't have some way to protect us from unnecessary things, we'll simply drown in all the data and all the functions and certainly all the messages. So I think designers today will have to be thinking more about that in the future. I do think also, as we're thinking about the user experience of wearables and the Internet of Things, managing 3D printers, etc., one of the things that's going to happen is that a lot of user experience design knowledge and techniques will be taught to younger and younger people. That this will be part of secondary education, or at least it should be. And that people will, I hope, come out as smarter young people and young professionals, knowing how they can actively change the world through better user experience design. And I'm not quite sure what will be taught in undergraduate and graduate schools. Hopefully more intense study of some of these issues, like cross-cultural user experience design, or design of user experiences for managing the Internet of Things, things like that. But I think people will have a lot more familiarity with some of the daily terminology and concepts and processes of user-centered design. At least I certainly hope so.
Okay, and that connects to our final question, which is, what kinds of changes do you foresee in the design community in the future?
Well, as I've said, I think there will be many more people in organizations, in companies, doing this work. In China, in 2002, there were relatively few user experience designers, as a evaluation survey showed, and most of them had only 2 years of experience, and yet they were trying to build lots of products and services. It's 10 or 12 years later. There are larger communities of people in China who are part of the user experience development crowd. They have more training, they have more opportunities, more experience. Same is true in Europe, in North America, in South America. I think one major challenge area is Africa and the Middle East. And those people will hopefully be paid to think about creating humane products and services. There is one missing component of most of their education, and that is an education in ethics. Most designers are not taught about ethics, and part of persuasion design or persuasive design assumes that one has a good ethical basis for creating the decisions about what to design. It is the case that some professionals and some people have used these persuasive techniques for very bad purposes, to move people to actions and activities that are harmful to others, even to killing them. So one of the challenges, I think, will be a better understanding of the ethics of design.
Right. Good point.
There aren't too many books on this topic.
Right.
It happens that my wife, Leslie Becker, Becker, did a dissertation on this subject at the University of California at Berkeley recently. The dissertation is available somewhere on the internet, and she's published at least one article in a book about this topic, showing also a method for incorporating ethical theory into designers' education. And that may be an important component, an additional component of educating a professional user experience designer of the future to have a better understanding of the ethical issues and the implications for society in general. That we're not just creating one little widget, but it's part of a larger context and has an effect on society as a whole.
And that was our final question for you, Aaron. So thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us, and thanks so much for taking the time to share your experiences with our audience. Thanks.
I appreciate the opportunity to give you some of my thoughts on these very good questions, and I hope everyone who's looking will be entertained and hopefully educated by what I've had to say. I thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak with you.